8th edition.
Yes, sir. We're now live, Mr. Chairman.
Pleasant, pleasant good night. Good night once again on our 30th edition of Belizean Affairs. I am pleased to be in the company of Mr. Gregory Brackett, Leonard Brackett, and Miss Sharon Pitts. Once more, right? We are going to bring to the nation, truth, and we are trying to educate the public of what is really going on this constitution, a matter that's before us in this country at this moment, which is very important for the public, to know what's going on, right? And take away from what we are giving them, right? So when that time comes to vote, if there is going to be a vote, they have a little knowledge because of the education that we are putting out there. So on that note, I want to thank our viewers and listeners, both at home and abroad, to another edition of 30th edition of Belizean Affairs. Um, I will turn it over to Leonard to introduce himself.
Uh, Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Leonard Brackett. I'm one of the panelists on this Belizean Affair show. As the chairman said, this is our number 38, 30, 30th show for Wednesday, 23rd of August, 2023. And I'm just tickled happily to have the privilege to be among the panelists on this particular show with the chairman, Mr. Roody Wade, uh, our next senior panelist, Mr. Gregory Brackett, and our distinguished, specially invited guest, Ms. Sharon Pitts. I'm glad for this privilege, and I hope to enjoy it tonight because tonight is going to be a continuation of the previous shows, the last two shows that we had, dealing substantively with constitutional matters as regards to Belizeans' right to vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And that said, I want to introduce our special guest. Special guest. She's a special lady, right? That has brought vast knowledge and experience, and she's about people and country. Miss Sharon Pitts, attorney at law. Good night, Miss Pitts.
Good night. Thanks. And with all our frailties, God over us, right? Thanks.
Amen.
And our distinguished gentleman, Mr. Gregory Brackett. Good night, sir.
Good night, Mr. Chairman. Good night to the people at home and abroad. My name is Mr. Gregory Brackett, sitting virtually along with Miss Sharon Pitts, attorney at law, and my good cousin, Mr. Leonard Brackett, as well as our chairman, Mr. Roody Wade. Again tonight on this our 30th edition, we are trying to educate on this virtual panel, and I think the Belizean people at home and abroad will learn something from us when it has to do with Belizean affairs. With that, I turn it back to our chairman, Mr. Wade.
It's we always start before we get into the meat of our program. Start with a word. I'm going to continue from Proverbs 11 to 24. Says, Proverbs chapter 11, 11 to 24 says, however, whoever works his hand will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuit lacks sense. Say, whoever is wicked, covet the spoil of evidence, but the root of the righteous bears fruit. And an evil man is ensnared by the transgression of his lips, but the righteous escape from trouble. From the fruit of the mouth, a man is satisfied with good, and the work of a man's hand comes back to him. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but the wise man listens and to advise, he listens to advise. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. Whoever speaks the truth gives honest advice, but a false witness utters deceit. There is one there is one who rush words like sword thrust, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Truthful lips endures forever, but lying tongue is but for a moment. So deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but those who plan peace have joy. No ill befalls the righteous, but the wicked are filled with trouble. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. That is my reading from Proverbs tonight.
Amen. Thanks.
Amen.
Leonard, can you give
Yes,
us
sir.
a prayer,
Yes, sir.
please?
Divine loving Father, as we come before thy presence once more, we pray that thou mayest continue to bless us, guide us, strengthen us, and protect us. Give us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Please help us to partake of the various virtues that thou hast blessed us with, and help us to make use of it for a greater cause than other than self. Please bless our family members and friends and loved ones wherever they are, as if they are each mentioned by name and number. Please bless our country of Belize, its people, and its leadership. Please bless the rest of humanity, especially those people who are going through wars and trials and tribulations and need of food, people who are hungry, people who need clothes and shelter. Be merciful unto them, Lord. Please guide our lips as we go ahead with this undertaking, that we may say things that resonate positively to a positive outcome, and that all people, Belizeans at home and abroad, may benefit from our efforts. Be with us now and always. For Christ's sake, we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Leonard. Gregory, I go straight to you. Open open the floor with what we want to discuss, continue to discuss tonight. Go ahead, my brother.
Right?
Greg, go ahead. Your your mic.
Gregory?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I try to turn my mic off so we can have some good
Thank
audio
you.
quality.
Thank you.
But tonight, I want to specify this constitution reform that we are facing. I believe that the reason why we are looking at constitution reform with the government coming to the people is because there is a threshold that they cannot pass, which is violating the rights of the people. Now, with that said, as we said on many occasions, the present government have a super majority and they can create any substantive laws and laws, except one thing, they are at a bar to violate the basic structure of the Constitution. So with that said, I would like to turn it over to Ms. Fitz for her to elaborate on that.
Okay, I believe we went into the case which was BCB and included the Boeing case, and basically what we saw last week was it last week or was it Monday?
Last week and Monday.
Last week and
Friday,
Monday.
last Friday as well as Monday.
Was that although the government seemed to be saying, you know what, in renationalizing or repatriating the majority of the utility company and passing a law, an amendment of the Constitution, which would have set it away, it illustrates that one could not use the jurisdiction of the court, and that was a prime example of separation of powers, and more so that the Constitution protects itself. It protects the country, the people, it protects the court, it protects the people from legislative excess. Now, arguing that even if a well-meaning government was to say, you know what, we are taking this because the other means would mean that we cannot get it back for the people, the court is still there to oversee one that, not just oversight, but with the authority under the Constitution. In other words,
excuse me a second, guys. It's coming down real hard. I need to
mute. Yeah, just mute your. Yeah. Go ahead, Ms. Spitz. Go ahead.
Yes, the court is there to protect the Constitution and the people. It's there to protect even the government. And of course, it protects itself in that. And this is the beauty of the Westminster style constitution that we have. It protects the country. It protects the people from abuse of executive power. It reins in administrative abuse. It protects people as amongst themselves. So with the rule of law, we go to court and rely on judgments. Even when they don't come to our favor, we have the right to appeal. And we go back to court to say, you know what, although you might have pronounced this way, that can be revisited, can be appealed, and so on. So in short, we have this beautiful system. And with respect to the court, if government or the legislature, rather, the legislative part of that separation of power in the country passes a law which seems to say, or says outright, you know what, we're amending the Constitution and we're so protective of the people might agree wholesale to it, but really and truly, the party who is affected, or one person as a matter of public interest, or even law officers of the court, because the court will not descend into the public arena. But if a matter such is brought to the attention of the court that the Constitution needs some matter to be addressed by way of its own protection or interpretation, or more profoundly, that the court was being ousted in its jurisdiction, the short answer is that any matter in the country, the resort to court is there. The matters of the Constitution, all matters of the Constitution, or what, and I will just use this word, justiciable, meaning they can be brought to court. And the Supreme Court, as it was then called, now we say the High Court of Belize, I think it was renamed. But the importance of it is that within the Supreme Court, it is created to have what we call original jurisdiction. So that means, come what may, you can have the court entertain a matter. Hence, and I think we gave this example before. I don't want to speak too long because I know time is constrained. So maybe you would guide me back to, maybe I don't need to go into example. But there was an instance when, due to administrative action, a man was already at the airport being put on the plane with an order to leave the country. His legal counsel managed to go to the court to have his body. That's called a writ of habeas corpus. And that is an extension too of the petitions that you would be able to do. And there's an urgency in that because, you know what, it also underscores an important part of the Constitution.
Sharon, before you
Yes.
leave that particular point that you just brought up, the gentleman who was ready to leave on the plane.
Yes.
What happened? The reason why they were allowing that extradition to take place is because we have, just as you mentioned in our last gathering, we have what you call these international treaties and obligations. And extradition is one of those. And we have an extradition agreement with the United States. And it was under that extradition that the young man was being extradited to the United States. But he was not afforded his full due Supreme Court overview of his case.
Hold on,
Because no matter where
Leonard. Let me spit. Yeah,
no, this is critical. This is critical. It's very critical. The authority of the minister was being applied then to superimpose and go beyond the authority of the court, which has the right to interpret and or to decide whether or not that gentleman should have been put on that plane. They were trying to escort the man out of the country quickly without him having his full judicial and habeas corpus rights exercised, which is why I'm glad that you brought that case up. Some of us do remember that particular case because it wasn't too long ago. It was under the UDP administration.
This one I'm talking about is decades before that.
Oh,
no?
okay.
Yes.
But
I don't remember the citation.
Yeah, but the similar.
Go ahead,
Sharon.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you for giving me a little partner economic.
Yes. So what it underscores is that I think, and we'll come back to this, this is important, right? So, birthright, citizenship, and privilege, right? And I think when one presenter was mentioning certain parts of the preamble of the Constitution, it seems there was a notion that, well, that was as though it was birthright. At least for me, I felt that if you weren't careful, it could come off that way. Definitely a part of the rule of law and parliamentary democracy, the Westminster type we have inherited, is that it affords even to strangers in the country equality before the law. But it doesn't mean that they have the rights of citizens per se. Why I say that is that by way of your citizen status, you have the right to vote. I take the view constitutionally, and I'll stand by it, that the right to vote is attached to your navel string, is attenuated to your citizenship. And that is not a status that you apply for citizenship. It's a birthright. So that the Constitution, as you see it, refers to the will of the people, free and fair elections. I think I won't go into it too much. We touched on it last week. How do you otherwise secure the will of the people in what is not a police state and what is not a dictatorship or a closed society? It's through an electoral process.
Right.
And how do you, since the Constitution mandates, requires policies of state, and then it lists quite an amount. So it has the Charter, the Bill of Rights. It has some fundamental rights and freedoms enumerated. So somebody might say, well, we don't see one which says in some constitution or the other, the right to vote. But a constitutional lawyer protecting somebody's constitutional right would say, you know what? We could go on this about this different ways, you know. If it is that somebody else who is a Belizean has the right to vote, there is a discrete provision in the Constitution that nobody is to, of citizenship, is to be treated with bias. So citizen in Belize, living in Belize, and citizen of Belize living abroad, there's one status. Now, with respect to our Constitution, when we had the amendment for dual citizenship, remember at independence, we had the extension, and just like with the extradition treaty, certain imperial or English statutes were extended to us post independence. And with respect to citizenship, they had a carryover period to 5 years initially. But definitely, what we have is that, in my view, you could skip to the Representation of the People's Act. Now, if anybody is saying that, and I'll just get to it since you have put it this way, Mr. Leonard, that a Belizean living in the United States or anywhere shouldn't have the right to vote or doesn't have. I think that's oxymoronic, to say the least, meaning the two things not go together, right?
Once a Belizean, always a Belizean.
Yes, once a Belizean, always a Belizean, and especially if it's birthright as opposed to a conferred privilege, right? So that with your birthright as a Belizean, for example, a person born of a Belizean parent or grandparent just has to go through the process of application to secure a passport to formalize it, right? So it's like you're called in to do that. You do that. So you do that positive act. But it's not that when you're issued with it, you're conferred with the citizenship. That is just like a Belizean living in Belize forever, not applying for a passport, right? But that is not to be confused with somebody who is seeking Belizean citizenship on the basis of privilege. I want to give one quick example, unless you want me to break here. But if
go
I
ahead,
am...
Go ahead, Sharon. Go ahead.
I remember today a matter I was dealing with, and it was before the Supreme Court. And the government settled without the judgment. It had to do, and I can quote it because it's, of such that a good example. It had to do with a Belizean getting married to a Cuban doctor. And this will illustrate something with treaties or bilateral agreements and so on, how they still can boost the court or trump certain things. So then the administration was of the view, you know what, we signed this bilateral accord, agreement, contract, whatever it was. And whatever you call it in international law, the name or the formality or the absence it on paper might not make a difference. It has to do with the substance, really, and the intent. So the man fell in love or fell in convenience. I believe it was love, mutual love. The Belizean lady, and they got married. He applied for his Belizean passport through the required process. So he had to apply for nationality on the basis that he was married to a Belizean. The administration of the day started to say by executive decision, you know what? You cannot have this passport, and he was delayed and thwarted, and I believe he might have been in a position where if he wasn't careful, he was going to be sent back home as easily as possible. When I say home, to where he came from. The matter was, in a sense, very straightforward, although it might have looked, you know, sometimes it's your rights are there or the privilege is there. Now that man, in my view, he was being given a privilege. But guess what? The right for his citizenship was an extension of the right of his Belizean wife. So that was not subject to discretion or a thwarting of that right. That was for him to go through that process. And, you know, so I just remembered that today somehow it came on my mind, so I illustrate that. Now, Belizean abroad, at home and abroad, we see that people who have dual nationality can vote whether online or by way of whatever apparatus is set up in the country or wherever they are. Could be at sea, actually, for a service in seaman, I believe, in certain countries. You know that all it is it's the policies of state and the apparatus of state to implement those. That is an imperative. When the Constitution says require policies of state, and you continue to read that other part, right? Who are the people? The people are the people of Belize. Who are the people of Belize? The citizens of Belize. Who can be better citizens than Belize? The people with birthright, navel string, you know, salt of the earth, Belizean, so to speak. Not people who have been conferred with a privilege, but we focus on salt of the earth, Belizeans. So if at one, you know, like it is that, why is this debate, this denial, this delay, this playing around with what has to do with birthright? To my mind, saying, well, you have to put it in the Constitution is, what will they then do? Will they, ironically, there are people who have gone through economic citizenship project or program or whatever you call it. Maybe
but it's already in the Constitution. It's already in the Constitution.
No, that is what I'm saying. So we have to see that as a legal handle. Now, I think Mr. Greg and Mr. Wade and Mr. I usually say Mr. Brackett, right? So I have to say Mr. Leonard, right? The courts can be looked to with respect to this. When you have redistricting, when you have re-registration exercise, and because somebody is left off the roll because they did not attend or they did not have what you call it, the birth certificate, or they just got frustrated because maybe they, you know, were settled in the particular constituency. And there might be a time frame for that process. Now we do have laws with respect to that, and that can be okay. But then again, the policies of state should be such that you function in a way to embrace people, and you take the lessons to and you hearken to what somebody might be saying. This person might say, well, you know what? I was left off the rolls because I had my whole Belizean passport. I had my Belizean birth certificate. But when I went to Vital Stats, because they were doing the transcribing from the
Uh,
printed binders or records to
the
the
computers.
computerized system, there was a computer glitch. Now I have to be proven my birthright when I have an expired Belize passport. I have an expired Belizean citizenship. I have traveled abroad. I have worked abroad. I've retired abroad. What is it? Then you would have people coming from across the border who would just with a scheduler or something. I don't know what a scheduler is. I'm really not sure, right? That's one of the words that
It's an
I
ID.
don't
It's
know
an
what
ID
I
that they
don't
give
know
them.
what it I don't know what it means, right? But
I know what it means, Sharon. Give me thank you.
I
That's what
don't
it
Give
know.
me
is.
the
That's
And
give me the house and the
I
land and
still
you got me
see
vote.
I
yeah.
still see signs up mark amnesty program. Where are the signs saying to Belizeans? Why is a campaign and a reminder to say to Belizeans, you know what? This thing that is your birthright, don't take for granted. Your children don't need to come and get a limited time to stay in Belize.
Mm.
They can get their birthright. And then the other thing is, why is there a backlog? What is it that would create a backlog? Why would Belizeans have to wait? Why would passports not be available? Now you see, we go into something else because in Jamaica they have a discrete provision in the Bill of Rights, fundamental rights, their charter of right to a passport or access to a passport. Now, in my view, we that signifies the carrier, the holder of the passport. I believe is so described Belizean abroad because that passport belongs to your state, because you belong to your country and your country belongs to you. Now, if you are a citizen and this is a part of that, why is it that you have to apply online? Suppose you are somebody who don't want to apply online. Why is it that you have to make an appointment? And if it is that you go for a walk-in, why is it that it seems that there's an expediency, one rush, one indecent haste, all the accommodations, toilet, tent, everything, public awareness campaign, big money to spend, have been spending, then they ball and beg more people to come in on an amnesty program when there are Belizeans out there who should not be bottleneck. Other people, they get fast track to
Mm-hmm.
whether we birthright, and
Mm-hmm.
we are virtually being told to stand in line. As I understand it, if your embassy is abroad, you don't have to make appointment. You go to that embassy. And one of the things we say sometimes, if you're in our country and no Belize embassy there, what part you going if you lost your passport, your travel document, somebody rob you and you got dollar to your name? What part you going? And I don't
And
mean
now,
Salvation Army.
and now they don't
You,
let you get on the plane if you go back home,
you go
get the
to the
passport
nearest
if you don't
British
have a document to
embassy.
travel.
You go to the nearest British embassy. I am not saying the British have pronounced that, but I'm saying by virtue of our history and heritage, that is my advice to any Belizean in that scenario. Then what you said, Mr. Brackett, about you not be able to board the plane, you would have provisions and you have where you can get an emergency passport. And that should be issued or issuable within,
I,
I
I
think they
just had
say 24 hours or dependent on the emergency.
I just had that problem with one of my daughters. I
Mm-hmm.
physically had to, after a whole year of going back and forward with them, and then they stopped communicating with us. I physically had to try and get my daughter on a plane to take her to Belize to get the process consummated, which we did. But when we were going to the airport, we had documents, we had her whole passport to show that she's a Belizean. We have her ID out here, and they refused to let her get on the plane because they say that they don't know if the Belizean government is going to allow her to go into the country.
But that is why
And
the
I try to,
Belizean
wait.
government,
I try to explain to a person that as far as our constitution is concerned, the government cannot stop none of our citizens from leaving the country or going into the country. The person was arguing with me and saying, well, they can't do nothing about that because they can't let my daughter come on the plane. So I had to leave my daughter at the airport to let her come back home while me and my next daughter continued the journey. And
but this
then
is
we
why
had to apply for a passport, a temporary passport for her in Belize as her
you have,
father, and send it to her so she could come the following time to get her regular passport.
but then we have diplomats, we have embassies, we have diplomatic couriers,
There's
we
nobody
have
in San Francisco.
diplomatic reach, we have understandings and agreements with other countries.
But Sharon, there was nobody in San Francisco to render that service to us. And we couldn't go to LA, where is the closest consulate, to go on as a walk-in because at that time they had the COVID, so you have to get appointment. And they would not give us an appointment, first of all, because we spent a whole year going back and forth with them. What they were trying to do was to hustle my daughter. And I refused to allow
There's a
her to
wrong
go through
set of
that
people that
process
they deal with.
because I didn't want my daughter to be found in a situation where they could have turned around later on and accused her of some malfeasance in terms of facilitating her passport for an extra side fee.
So then,
So they
what
target
I
her,
am
they
saying is
blackmailed her.
that what I am saying, you have email, you have diplomatic reach. Diplomats of Belize, somebody with authority, already exists to be able to make communication, write that, and smooth that. That is one of the things with respect to citizenship, and you should
I,
have accessibility to that. So
I
that
was
is
dealing,
a machinery of the
Sharon,
administration
Sharon,
which
I
should
was
function.
I was dealing with some of the highest people in the foreign affairs department of our country. I was dealing with people next to the minister himself. That's how far up my situation went in terms of my advocacy and my ability to put and bring pressure. I went to Belize on a previous trip before that situation, or at least while the process was going on, because like I tell you, for a whole year we were going, more than a year, from June 1 year to August the following year, and she never get her passport, I think, till the November of the following year. More than almost a year and a half. And when I went and spoke with the head of the passport department at that time, they told me the documents that I was showing them are valid. Go back to San Francisco, submit it to Los Angeles, and let the people in Los Angeles send it to us in Belize, and we won't follow through the process. They gave me then one direct numbers and then direct email to deal with them. Once I got over here, I followed the procedure as they had told me. The young lady that we were dealing with before then turned around and lied to her supervisors and superior when they came to her to ask her what was the difficulty and why is it that we were having such difficulty. She lied to them, and then they turned around and sent us an email saying that we didn't do what the young lady had told us to do. After that, like I said, I got my daughter to Belize, and we went through the process to get the passport, the permanent passport, because we had to get a temporary first in order for her to get on the plane from here to end up in Belize to get her permanent. When we got got her in Belize, we paid the fee for expediting, and we still had to wait almost a week or more before we got it. We paid for 24 hours service, but of course at the time we had to agree to the reality that they never had full staff. There was the COVID going on and a whole lot of other stuff. So we could have just pay for the regular service and get it at the time when we got it because we got regular service.
Can I ask
Yep.
something?
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead,
What is
Sharon.
that
Go
they
ahead,
were
Sis
saying
Sharon.
your daughter required a visa to come to Belize?
Not a visa. She required a traveling document authorized by Belize before she would get on the plane out here to go to Belize to go and get her passport renewed, which is what we were trying to do because we couldn't get
You
it
know,
done
you
in
know
LA
why I asked the
for
question?
over a year.
You know why I asked the question?
Uh-huh.
Because, and this is not exact, but if it is that people from Russia and Israel and all sorts of
Aye,
other
aye,
countries
aye.
could come to Belize without
I was,
the requisite visa, then it seems to me that that option should be, it shouldn't even be an option.
And
You
that is a
take
band
your
Belizean and
card,
was
exactly,
born in Belize.
come,
Okay.
if we have,
exactly.
and that might just be symptomatic of a lot of Belizeans who have that problem. If you were to canvass Belizeans, a lot wouldn't have shared that story, I'm sure. So then you could have
Anyhow,
the travel document,
sorry for
but you
segue
should be
out of
able to
the
have
program, no, on my
some other
personal stuff.
strategy or option if you really want to say, you know
Let
what,
me,
we
It's
ensure
all done
Belizeans.
and over with, you know, it's over with. So I don't want to waste the rest of the program.
Yeah.
To
let,
You
stay
finish
let
up
me
focused on the
say
the.
program.
this, Mr. Chairman. Let
Go
me
ahead.
say this, if I might. This brings us back to exactly what we are trying to educate our people on, the Constitution.
And they're right.
Because this is what our government do. It gets the Belizean people living in the diaspora so frustrated that they don't want to come home none at all. And that makes it even worse. They don't want to take part in general election because they're having this issue. But like Miss Pitt said, if other people from other nations can simply come without a visa and stay for a month, it should not be that hard for Belizean to come home, expired passport or not. That is your constitutional right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we're trying to educate because this is how they're taking advantage of the people in the diaspora through the Seventh Amendment as though they're not Belizeans anymore. And this is ludicrous. You are talking about born Belizean living in the diaspora who cannot get on a plane and come back if they're having an issue with passport. That is
Mm-hmm.
crazy. You
Go ahead.
know?
Now, if
Thank you.
I
Go
had
ahead,
that,
Leonard. Leonard,
I had
go ahead,
that
Leonard.
kind of
Yeah.
problem,
Miss Pitts,
imagine.
you want to contribute something
No,
else or?
I'm listening. No, I'm listening a bit.
Okay.
I was saying
Go
that
ahead, Leonard.
if I had that problem, the person that I am and the capacity or capability that I have that problem. I was imagining in my mind, what kind of hell some of we other local Belizeans out here are going through. And I was hearing stories right, left, and center when I was posting some of the information on the internet that other people was having a hell of a lot worse situation than I was having. And because I was pulling strings or pulling levers or I was able to use some power players in order to get attention and get my rights vindicated or my daughter's rights vindicated. But anyhow, like I said, the show should not have been about that. And while it is
Well,
about Belizean rights as
Go
well,
ahead, Leonard.
I
we
agree
need
with
to.
you.
I
But
need. I need.
listen to this.
Uh,
How come the foreign minister can't get a group of immigration employees and fly them to the US as they did when they fly south with
hello,
over 1,000 passports?
hello. Boxes. 1,000 passport was literally boxes and boxes and boxes of passport.
One of
And
the
as of,
things that I have
and some of those people,
difficulty with,
and some of those people that got those passport then, they were not Belizeans at the time. They were fast tracked for Belizean citizenships. But they don't know that we know that. You see, that's their problem, not ours.
Want to say
I may
something, Miss
almost
Pitts?
sue. I may almost sue.
Oh,
The Minister of Foreign Affairs himself, Mr. Courtney, and his department, as well as the Vital Statistics Office, because I have, like I said, records on them that I've been keeping from in the 90s. Okay, when they were selling people's, you see that same situation when people were going to go and get their passport. Greg, that you may brought up about people were having to change their name in the 90s before they could vote. When they go
Right?
up there, I had
Right?
records on a lot of women that happened from way back then. I was investigating that department when they were having people. I had one of my clients, 88 years old, the person. They wanted the man go change the name to a different name because the name that he had been known by for 80 odd years and live his whole life and have all the documents and credentials and everything that the whole man life. In order for the man get to exercise the franchise, to vote they wanted the man to get on the poll and change the name. The man say he don't want to worry that he know who he is, and if he can't get to re-register or get to exercise the franchise, the hell with that, make them keep it. But that should not have had to be. Why? Because then turn around the same vital statistics department. At that time, I know I used to call it vital statistics. Okay, and I could tell you exactly the street where I used to be on when I'm talking about, by Gabriel Lane. Okay, and I was way inside of the department there investigating them, and some of them was selling people's Belizean records and vital information to create new identities for people that was giving them brown envelope with big money in there. Okay,
but I believe at the end of the day, I believe, and I strongly believe that Belize have some diplomats out there that never touch foot on Belize soil. I believe when those passports went south, some of those passport individuals were registered as diplomats of this country.
Exactly.
And they never touched foot on this soil.
That's 100% correct.
Right.
Let me go to Mr. Wade. Mr. Wade.
Well, Sharon had something she wanted to.
I'm want to get my chance to expound on the
right. Go ahead.
No,
go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Leonard. Go ahead.
We done that for the 6 minutes already, so
go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Holy mackerel.
Sad situation what's going on in our country, man, where it comes to our patrimony, who gets
sad to say it's still happening.
Who gets preferential treatment?
It's still happening. What do you think is going on?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead then.
Can I
go ahead,
Leonard?
Yeah. Okay, go ahead now, Leonard.
Item number 1: the Belize Independence Constitution, generally known as short-titled as Belize Constitution, effective as of 21st of September 1981. Item number 1A: Preamble. Enshrined citizens' people's rights. Paragraph C, E, F, etc. Paragraph C reads as follows: we believe that the will of the people shall form the basis of government in a democracy, in a democratic society, in which the government is freely elected by universal adult suffrage, by public voting, or a plebiscite. Item number 1AB, small b, paragraph E: we require policies of state which protect and safeguard the unity, freedom, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Belize. And then I skip a little part out and I went on to say, read the rest of it, which says, which protect the right of the individual to life, liberty, basic education, basic health, the right to vote in election. So that's a right that we have. We have a right to vote, and it's constitutionally prescribed, enshrined in our in our preamble, and mandated by the preamble, to the extent to which they create not only just other subsections of the law to follow through on it, but they create a whole department for elections and boundaries. A whole department. How can someone get the impression or convey the impression that we don't have a right? And we empower a whole department to look after us having the opportunity or the privilege to exercise our rights. I'll go a little further. Paragraph E. We require, I just read that, I'm sorry. Paragraph F. We desire that the society shall reflect and enjoy the above mentioned principles, beliefs, and need, and that the Constitution should therefore enshrine. It says right there in the Constitution itself that the Constitution enshrines. It's a command. It's not a request, which is why we end up with a whole department, like I said earlier. So that department is there to facilitate us being able to exercise our franchise and our right to vote, not to derogate from our rights or to put up little simidimi stuff as they do in the Representation of the People's Act to sidetrack and to find ways to take away or suppress people's constitutional rights. Anything that they do should not be to take away your rights or to suppress it. Anything that they do as a government on behalf of the people with goodwill towards the people would be to facilitate you being able to exercise that right. It's enshrined.
That is exactly why Ms. Pitt said that the Constitution protects itself. If you recall, guys, Ms. Pitt said it. The Constitution protects itself. And that is true because it is enshrined and cannot be written what? Out of existence.
Can I finish?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go
Continue.
ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to read section 85 of our Constitution, which says, a general election of the members of the House of Representatives shall be held at such time within 3 months after every dissolution of the National Assembly. A general election, meaning the coming together of the plebiscite of the country to decide who will get the privilege to run our affairs. So we have what? A general election by means of vote under the universal suffrage decrees. From 1954, we have been empowered with that. As I mentioned in previous, I think it was the last time we were on the show, that we have been exercising the freedom to vote, the privilege and opportunity to vote for hundreds of years now. And not just today, we're up on a journey. And at one point, when we went from being a settlement to become a colony, because we wanted to preserve our independence or our rights to live on that piece of land, we asked the British for defense guarantee. And the way the defense guarantee came in was for us to then agree to become a protectorate colony. After being a protectorate colony for all those years, in 1955, we were given back our rights under the universal suffrage decrees. And subsequent to that, we had our self-government, which we used to exercise back 200 plus years before. We had that reverted back to us in 1964, before independence. So even before we got independence and we got this constitution that we're now quibbling over and trying to derogate and dispense with, we had the right to vote and had been exercising that right to vote, which is why we voted and elected all those past leaders under the UP administration. It was all through voting. And today, we are going to be told we don't have a right to vote. In other words, when they go back to the 200 odd years ago when we gave up or settlement status for colonial status. Then we give up the rights. Who would they give up that right to? Or who's supposed to hold that right on our behalf? And how are we supposed to get it back? Let me read this stuff, man, because
Let
I'm
me
here.
mention section 56 as well. I asked the question, Mr.
Go
Well,
ahead.
gentlemen and listeners,
Go ahead.
I don't make light of these things. So forgive me if it sounded like I was being flippant, no? But I was saying if it is that people don't have the constitutional right to vote, if citizens don't have it or people don't have it, citizens who by the constitution have birthright and the status, the born Belizean, the child or grandchild of a born Belizean, start with that. Then it means that all the plebiscites, all the voting, then there were no proper elections.
Everything
Now you
is
look at section 56 of the Constitution. This Constitution never made a joke, you know. When I say protect yourself, look like it.
Mm-hmm.
Caption the House of
Right.
Representatives. I don't know if I'm looking at the 1981 one, right? Section 56. So maybe I don't know if that has been changed. I am not able to cross-reference, sorry. Subject to the provisions of this section, a House of Representatives shall consist of 18 members who shall be elected in the manner provided by law. What is the supreme law? Is it not the very supreme law that you refer to further in this Constitution? It provides the law, but it provides here as well. It provides in the preamble. And I think everybody cognizant, but for those who don't know, when a statute says shall, when the Constitution says
a
shall,
command.
that is mandatory. It's not
Mandatory. It's
discretionary.
a mandate. Mm-hmm.
It's not optional.
When a dictator prescribes says may in law, if you have may as a discretion, then know whether you how you want to do it, you know, you may still impute it into that. The law protect you that you should have reasonableness. So that discretion, just like when you go to a court, right? And if a court makes a decision, the court is the judicial body, but it ought to make a determination in a judicious manner based on what is judicious. And that is why people can appeal, people can respectfully argue with all the protocols of conduct and etiquette to say we respectfully, the learned judge heard, or had this been brought to the attention of the judge, etc., etc. So, and then you see, like in the constitutions, there would be provision as to who is to be elected, whatever in a position, and it might be that the prime minister, after consultation with the leader of the opposition, but we might say, well, a checker, right, and a consultant, a caller, and say, well, you know what? I plan to appoint this person. But then the court can still argue and be looked to say, what is consultation? Was it meaningful? Was it so that, you know, then it imports what are the qualifications or not necessarily the qualities, but one other thing I didn't point out, I don't think clearly, and I'll say this in like 10 seconds.
Sharon, could I
Yes.
finish up what I was doing here,
Yes,
if you don't mind?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to go
I
back
think
to
that's
the
important.
round robin. Or I just want to finish up this little part here, if you don't mind,
Yes,
please.
yes.
Under Section 90, it says, the Elections and Boundaries Commission shall, after considering the electoral distribution of the population throughout Belize, they shall make proposals from time to time for dividing Belize into electoral divisions in such a way that for example, each electoral division shall, a command, a mandamus,
Yes.
have and nearly as may be an equal number of persons eligible to vote. So that's the Constitution, Section 90, telling you that people have a right to vote. And that is
And
91.
it's
92.
proportional representation, isn't it?
No. That's not.
It's not
Section 90. Section
section
90.
90 limit.
Uh-huh.
Oh, section 90.
Subsection. Section 90, subsection 2. I just read subsection 1. I'm reading now subsection 2.
Oh,
In
sorry.
fixing the boundaries of electoral divisions, the Commission shall have regards to the transport and other facilities of the division and to its physical features. Section 91. Any redivision of electoral divisions in accordance with Section 90, which I just read above, of this Constitution, shall, see how that word shall keep repeating itself over and over and over? It's a mandamus. It's a required. In other words, it's implementing the commands that come from the preamble into a legal draftsperson structure or format now to facilitate or to allow for putting into existence what the preamble dictates that we the people require. It says shall, in respect of the elections and boundaries of the House of Representatives. Oh no, I missed out something there. Respect of the election of members of the House of Representatives come into operation at the next general election held after such redivision and not earlier. 92 goes on to say, at any general election, which means that when the plebiscite votes, paragraph A says, every citizen of Belize or a citizen of any Commonwealth country who has attained the age of 18 and who satisfies the requirements of the Representation of the People's Act, Cap 9, shall have the right to vote. What our Constitution says under Section 92, subsection A, at the end that I just read, shall have the what?
The right to vote.
Why did my learned friend Mr. Dickey imply that we don't have a right to vote? We would not have spent 3 nights in a row now on our program trying to repeat these things so that the people can understand and see for themselves that the very Constitution that they're referring to and talking about tells them what the facts are.
Let me answer that for you.
Can I finish?
Finish
Yeah,
up,
finish.
Leonard. Finish up, Leonard.
I want to get most
And pass it to Greg.
Yeah. I want. Paragraph B goes on to say, no person shall be entitled to more than one vote. What it says? Vote. You have a right to vote, but you don't have a right to vote more than once. You should only have one vote. You have that right. Nobody should be able to take it away from you. Paragraph C goes on to say, votes shall be cast in a secret ballot. Votes again, the word votes again, that they say we don't have a right to, shall, it's a command, be cast in a secret ballot. What is a ballot? The thing where we vote pan or we express we vote, right? The piece of paper or whatever, however is it. We have a right to vote. Fundamental at that. Under Section 93, it says, subject to the provisions of 88 to 92 above, inclusive, of this Constitution, the provisions of the Representation of the People's Act, Cap 9, shall, remember the word shall again, shall apply to the franchise, the right to vote. What is our franchise? Or right to vote. We were given that back from 1954, and it was grandfathered into our Constitution. We were able to exercise it all those years, even at the time of self-government. It was a requirement under self-government decrees for us to exercise that right to decide who we want to govern us. And it was grandfathered into the Constitution preamble that we got for independence, as well as clarified by the drafters of the Constitution in detail at the different sections that we are now reading about. So either our learned friends who advocate otherwise are not doing their homework in terms of just reading the document, because the document is only 100 odd pages long. Okay? The Constitution of Belize is only 100 odd pages.
I am seeing something now.
Go ahead.
I am looking at as I said, the old one. So I have to be, if anything, revisit, no? But I think what they might be using is that C, which has the residence qualification in a particular electoral division for not less than 2 months immediately preceding the date in the electoral division in which he seeks registration.
But none
So
of those supposed to supersede your right to vote. They're supposed to be
yes, I'm
facilitating
saying.
it.
So what they can easily do, in my view, they don't need to. They can give the policies of state can be implemented quite easily by way of the. I'm sorry, I was looking at the Representation of the People's Act, right? Of the People's
What section was that? What section of it you was
It's the
talking about just now?
then section part 2, section 5, franchise and registration.
Correct.
So to my mind, the Representation of the People's Act is not to derogate from the Constitution.
Exactly.
Because it requires the policies of state to give effect to it, such as the will of the people. Then what they can do, and this is what I have, I think, been trying to bring across and instill in our people. The statute, Parliament can look to the Representation of the People's Act, if anything, and put within its framework, if this resident period is an anomaly, you have different ways of doing that. You can say, well, look, we have so many Belizeans in Los Angeles, right? Who are born Belizean, salt of the earth, Belizean, third generation. So we can have that as an electoral division. We can have that in Los Angeles, we can have that in Miami. The other way to do it is to say, you know what, if you're looking, you see with the Constitution, you have that which Mr. Brackett, Mr. Leonard, you mentioned as to you should have pretty much the same amount of people, no? Or near us.
Equal
and
representation.
how the Constitution is.
Sharon, could you hold that for a second? That wouldn't fly as far as the Belizean politicians are concerned. You know why? There are more Belizeans out here in the States and our offspring than there are in Belize proper.
Well, what are they afraid of? They're doing good by the people, and Belizeans abroad have done good by this country and this birthright. Why be afraid of the people? The people can help you, the people can guide you, and you need the participation of the people.
Yes, Sharon, but if they fear right now for Belizeans to come home and participate and become elected, how much more fear would they have to realize that we have more Belizeans out here? And if you empower every Belizean by virtue of Section 90 clauses, especially Clause A, that requires nearly the same amount of voters within each division. When you're talking about in some parts of LA or New York or other places where have literally 50 odd, 60 odd thousand Belizeans. How much area representative they would be entitled to then if they get the same equal? Wait,
something.
I'm being provocative. If they
You know
can get the
something
same
that
equal
somebody
2,000
told me one time.
members like Port George,
You see,
that
like
means that we have more representative out here in the
I
states,
don't know if
and
this
that's
is a
my
good
belief. That's
analogy.
not going to fly.
I
Go
don't
ahead,
know if this
Sharon. Go ahead,
is a
Sharon.
good analogy. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, say go ahead.
Finish
Then.
up, finish up.
But somebody once said, right? Imagine if certain countries that you consider great were not racist and did not, by racial discrimination,
How much greater
exclude
it will be.
certain people from participation. Imagine participation. Imagine how much further those countries could be.
Mhm.
And I would say, imagine, believe, if we do not
Mhm.
embrace our people abroad. And it's not just remittances. Belizeans have been the
Goodwill.
forefront,
Goodwill.
diplomatic goodwill. They carry the culture. They live it, right? They bring tourists to Belize. They bring husband and wives, and I mean, they represent us well for the most part. Belizeans are, when they're in, sometimes I go leave here and they see what you call it, they say mediocre. But Belizeans excel in certain environments, and that's one thing I love about the US, right? I think that you can have the American dream, right? It is about participation. When they talk about brain drain in the Caribbean and other countries, right? You know, it is that these first world and developed countries are smart enough. They see people who have the ability to add, to improve, to participate, right? And out of that inclusivity, and I'm saying people of like the Caribbean and so on, as far as I know. Now I can only speak for that with familiarity, right? So that what would we be? How much further would we be ahead? It would be, and I even like brain drain, but wouldn't it be a reverse of the brain drain? And then people don't have to physically come, but people have a right to come. You can't be saying to Belizeans at home, smile and be nice to the tourists. We need the tourists. Well, guess what? I think apart from remittances, when the average Belizean comes for 10th of September and Independence and Christmas and Easter and Lobster Fest and so guess
They
and
spend more
graduation,
on tourists.
wedding and funeral, well, guess what?
They
You
spend more
have
on tourists.
multiplier effect. When the immigration officer they worry about charging duty and they looking at the shoes to see if they may wear it one time or two times. Well, I'm telling you something. When I reach Belize Profit, know how to shop. Boy, I left this with me. I like see your rug. So there's a kind of, but it is their input is superseded. I dare say the average Belizean who comes home spends far more than the average cruise ship tourist. And anybody who disagrees with me can do a discrete poll and analysis in the international sea trade industry. Many years ago, they were saying that when you think about cruise tourism, right? Average person eat them banana on the ship, right? And then come on shore a little. But the point I'm making is that the man will sell fresco, the taxi driver, the lady where they sell the food at the airport, the person where they bring in them back so and come by truck. When they start to give out things, they bring school bag for the school children and they do like well, that's a social thing.
And the amount of
The
money what
incomes
they
get
bring back
fixed.
home.
You
The
have
amount of money what they
humanitarian.
bring back
Look at the
home.
last hurricane. Who ran to our rescue more than anybody else here? There were scores of Belizeans who came down physically
Sharon?
and humanitarian effort. I have cold
Sharon?
seeds, right? Mhm.
Sharon?
Yes.
I just want to mention among our panelists here and for the listening public an economic fact that is not widely known or exposed or referred to. Belizeans abroad that go home provide more economic support for our country by far. I'm going to repeat that. By far than what the money that they make in the tourist industry in terms of just not Belizean tourists coming at home. I mean, just the regular tourists that just come to visit. Because
I-
when those tourists come to visit, they're not going to left no lot of money for their relatives and their friends and other people
The money
in the
gets
community.
expatriated back. Not
Okay,
repatriated, it gets expatriated, exported back. In the
but
cruise
the
tourism
point,
sector,
the point that I
most
was trying
things
to
are
raise,
pre-sold abroad.
the point I was trying to raise is that how much more economically better off can Belize be in terms of the economic impact of Belizeans visiting home or just traveling home for whatever reasons, compared to the amount of money that they're clamoring right now and looking forward now to get from the tourism industry, when in fact these same Belizeans are providing a lot more to our economy. Imagine if they said I
All
make a
right.
Consistent,
hundred, if they said
All
I make
right,
a hundred
guys.
consistent.
million, wait, if they
All
said I
right.
make $100 million out of tourism, which is like a small percent, because I know they make more than, they make hundreds of millions. But I'll just use 100 million as an example. If they say they make 100 million off of tourism, it is very likely a 2 for 1 Belizeans contributing compared to the tourists. We contribute twice as much as the tourists, which would mean we contribute 200 million. And I'm saying the economic impact is much more than that. It's not just the money we send through Western Union or through the regular banks or through any other methods, or money where we care for when we go, or what we send with other people. Because some people out there, they don't want other people know their business in terms of they don't want them you get known how much do they send through Western Union or how much do they send, because sometimes even the Western Union and the other money transfer people in, they have rules and regulations that they have to abide by because of the government out here and the way how they want to keep tabs on what's going on so that they could. So money goes home
Non-profit
in so many other different
organization
ways.
bill.
Huh?
I
The non-profit organization bill.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
will say
Just
this,
doing
right?
damage to us
I will
or to
say
Belize.
this. You know what come to my mind? Self-denial. Belizeans abroad have denied themselves of certain of the
we talked
comforts
about
they
it.
could have,
We talked
certain of
about
the
it.
bling they could have, certain of the holidays they could have elsewhere. You know, they could
In
be
order to
doing certain
remit
things
that,
with their monies,
yeah,
investing to get better return, but they bank in
or
Belize.
set
The
up for
bank on Belize.
retirement,
I'm not saying
or set
money
up
coming
for
through the
retirement.
bank, right? But it's long standing. A tourist come and a tourist is notional. Well, 2 week, 1 week, and like cruise tourism is fickle, right? It's only as good as the hurricanes free season or the next this or that. So even
Guys,
like you
we
that
are
said,
at
Barbados would try
guys.
to convert
We're at
it.
1:18. So
Uh-oh.
Okay,
Uh-oh.
good.
yeah, Greg, you want to do your closing there, my
You
brother?
know,
Then we go wrong.
this is nice, good, open conversation. And I thank you, Miss Spitz and cousin Leonard.
You're welcome,
But
sir.
I have a saying, you know, my saying will always be, as educated as one may be, that does not mean they can run a country. This is what is happening to Belize. We have what we call educated persons, liars, and they cannot run the country. Which brings me to what I will say now,
Ouch,
Mr.
lawyers
Wade.
don't run the country. Ouch, ouch. Ay, 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 we can. I want to say something
Uh, uh,
later on. Sorry. Forgive
uh,
No,
me.
go
but
ahead with your
Well,
closing there,
you'll have your
well,
Greg.
closing.
I
You'll have
believe
your
an
let's
closing.
American
let's
called
let's
Sharon,
me.
say this
Sharon,
too.
Sharon, you will have
Sorry.
your closing in a
Oh,
second. Let
oh
Gregory
yeah,
finish.
sorry, sorry.
Yes,
And likewise, there's a saying when the hunter becomes the prey. And I'm using these terms to specify certain things. I once used to go to school and I was complaining about my teacher, why I couldn't pass certain subjects. I told my mother and she would always say it is me. But here I'm seeing the same thing. You have educators who wants to teach the Constitution that they themselves need educating on the Constitution. So how can it help us?
It's looking over.
And we have a government who is stipulating through the educators that we do not have the right to vote. I wonder if he's using the Putin mentality as he did in Ukraine. Because what happened in Ukraine when it came to voting, you saw what Putin did. March the people and help them vote to take over the territory, which is authoritarian rule. So now if we have a government who is saying you don't have a right to vote, he's specifying that he has your right to vote and he will give it to you when time is for referendum purposes. Now imagine, you know, but I said that to say this to the people at home and abroad. When these third-party instructors who are teaching the fundamental rights of the Constitution come to you and they present, and they mention to you that you do not have the fundamental right to vote, they are saying that because they believe if that was your right, you shouldn't have to register. Well, let me clarify this for them. The reason why we register is to have democracy. It is obvious that that is why we have election and boundary department. As you mentioned, my cousin, you can only cast one vote. And this is how democracy works, to keep away voter fraud. So by they saying, if this is out of context or their belief that you don't have a right to vote because you have to register first, I'm saying this to them, to educate them. The reason for that is to prevent voter fraud and to have a genuine and true democracy.
Amen.
Mr. Wade?
Ms. Sharon, go ahead, Ms. Sharon.
I'm glad. I know I saw what I said before because.
Yes, man. Go ahead, man.
No. Somebody one time said in the airport and they hear loud-mouthed people from abroad. They say, this is our easy in English or American or whatever. This is the easiest country for two foreigners to take over. And the Belizean was shocked and frightened and scandalized and woe and so. And when he called me, I say, well, it's them who said that. Imagine for any one or more of us for who it's birthright and we love Belize. Despite all that's going on, isn't it the easiest country for you to look after? And the people, the Constitution. Then just quickly, another thing that might be affecting Belizeans, Americans especially. You remember the example which was given that with respect to freedom from deprivation of property, well, laws can be passed for city council to sell people's land at auction. People wouldn't be paying their taxes or their grass high. Well, the grass high because you know what? They don't have knuckles down competition and clean up, and they don't have programs to show people intrinsic value. And Belize City as rich and fertile as the Nile River. But apart from that, I think one of you gentlemen reminded me that in the past, if you wanted to go and sell land, you'd have to have the administrative part to then go to the court, or you have the opportunity to go to the court. But that law, to my mind, the policy of state, that law should not be correct because it's, you see, you're talking disenfranchising people, then it's ripping poor people, especially from their land. What we should have, and I'm talking, is so enough to get it, and we could come back to it next time. You should have in giving the required policies of state to avoid unlawful deprivation of property, because it's not forgotten, especially when the cases say that if government acquired, it has to be for public purpose
Right.
and adequate compensation, and it's
Right.
subject
Exactly.
to the court.
Amen to
So
that.
you have some Jancroft vultures. So when I even ban the Belize, where it sound like they scout for people land, and then in short, the positive is that where are the people who have this training, who can say, you know what, public interest matter, right? Where's the compassion? Somebody said we should have compassionate democracy. And hereby tomorrow they said they're not compassionate Democrats, by the way, right? You know how it go. It look like when we setting they fall foot, but that's good. The people better off. So you should have security of tenure. A lot of Belizean Americans, they're over there doing this, that, for send back scholarship, for survive, for help Belize and Belizeans and hold the fort. Some of them who are deprived of jobs and other things in Belize, victimized. So you have land tied up in estates and other things. Where is the program to encourage this? Where is the whole enough? Where is the reprieve? Where is the consultation with the people? You want consult, build up the people constitution and ask about those things. When the government and diplomats get the people in and the country in difficulty, Mr. Golson used to say, you listen to the people. Can't believe people when they vex and got disquiet, they not talk, right? And you be their voice and their conscience. Why is it that we cannot see our policies of state, which as opposed to undervaluing these people, ripping them from their land, right? And then the big hotels will come marching in, the seaport, the airport, and so on. Want to know what happened? Want to know what happened? The people are being deprived. And I am not guessing they couldn't have made to do it better than if they planned. Or put it this way, if I want to be nice, maybe they don't see the impact or the error of their ways. But we have to find the redeeming quality in our politicians, because since they have been voted in, they are mandated by the people. The people are getting mandate for foolishness. Carry out the
Correct. That is
policies
correct.
of the Constitution. How can a municipality be doing that to our people in a whole? And then what happens when it happens in a Belize to the rest of the country? Catch cold or COVID. A COVID will catch now.
Sharon?
Right.
When it may bad too. Epidemic
Go
of
ahead.
deprivation of people's property. It must stop, because you're robbing people of their property, their
Right.
hope, their attachment, and their very dignity. You're
Sharon?
breaking the culture. You're
Sharon?
breaking the heritage.
Sharon,
Sorry, sir.
we could
Sorry,
bring that
sir.
up. We could bring that up.
Your turn, Leonard. Go
our
ahead.
next discussion.
Go ahead, Leonard.
Uh,
You're closing here.
I'm going to defer to you, Mr. Chairman, so you could use up whatever.
Mr. Chairman.
We don't have no. We only have like 2 minutes left right now, you know.
Okay.
So
Mr.
I'll
Chairman,
defer to
just
you.
before we
But
close,
before that, Judge,
I would like to say, right?
wait, give me a second.
I've heard.
Give Leonard.
Go ahead, Leonard.
1 second. Sharon,
Yes.
I was saying that that same topic that you was on just now needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. So on our next meeting, if you're able to make it, could we remember to take that up so we can, all of us could have a chance to weigh in, because it's a very important subject.
Very, very. I was going to
Mr.
say the
Chairman,
same thing.
I think Greg was asking for.
Go ahead, Greg.
Right. To add on what Ms. Pitts just said, I'm highly upset because we are always hearing about the indigenous people land, the Garifunites, the people down south. What happened to the black people land that went to fight the wars that was supposed to be given away when they come back?
Hello.
There's a lot of Belizean people, Creole, who grandfathers and forefathers have not get their piece of land yet. And we need to talk about that also.
We'll
Right.
put that in with what?
Guys,
We'll expand the subject.
guys,
No, we'll make it one big
these
discussion.
are
Mr. Chairman.
close, right? I want to thank you guys, and it's always a pleasure, because this is very educational, right? Educational for our people, right? The ones that comes and you know, reap the sweet, you know, they do not want to hear this, but this is directly for our people. people that have been disenfranchised, have been taken advantage of for decades, right? Miss Spitz, that's a subject that we want to continue on. Leonard, we want to continue on that. Gregory, we want to continue because that's directly affect us.
We have a Facebook user.
You know how many
It says good night to
people
all.
out there, their family property has been taken decades and decades
Right.
ago, and they
So
haven't been
rightful, Miss
compensated
Spitz.
a penny,
So
and we
rightful,
will
Miss
not
Spitz.
have any statute of
Right.
limitation on that.
And the thing is, I want to close off by our diasporan. You said a mouthful there, Miss Spitz. What are these? What them people afraid for? I say in a Creole. What them people afraid for Belizean American, right? The so-called right Belizean American to come home and participate, not to vote, participate, right? And Leonard, you says the amount of us that's abroad, right? And most of us, Leonard, had contributed to this country, right? Has served this country like first, not myself.
As a
Right?
single individual, Mr. Wade, I can tell you there are tens of thousands of people that I have contributed to. Okay? Tens of thousands over the last 50 odd, 60 odd years.
And
Okay? And I am
you
only
know,
one. There are many others like myself who
and
have
the
good
States-
faith and goodwill towards our country and would like to be able to do more.
exactly.
Because the
Guys,
more we do, the better off things can be.
I have said this right before. I round it off to 80% of the daily living and daily activities of our people home comes from the US, from Belizean American. Huh? What is wrong with these
If I could
politicians?
quickly say, you know what Creole song make out of the angst and the reality of the people?
We got-
Lord Reagan no right one song about
We're gone over the limit already.
2 minutes over the minute. Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
we're gone over.
Um,
Mr. Chairman,
And you know
please
what,
wrap up, sir.
gentlemen?
Please
yes,
wrap
sir.
up.
Yes, sir.
Goal chairman,
Gentlemen.
match for match.
Thank you, guys.
There
And,
will-
and let's
We could
pick
talk
this up.
afterwards, no? We could
Yes.
talk afterwards.
There will
Yes.
be an issue right now because they had passed an amendment and some businesses are highly upset that the government is putting a threshold on their product that they're supposed to sell. I mean, they are up in arms. I was surprised
Let's
when I
let's-
get in.
The government
Let's-
is in trouble because they never stand up and do their job initially. Okay? And
Right.
these people ride the back of the poor people in for so long that they feel like they have a right to do that.
these are things that directly affect our
government is
people,
not
man.
doing
Ooh,
So
I
like you
can't
said,
wait for Friday.
on Friday, we
Um,
will. And it's always a pleasure,
Mr.
guys.
Chairman, if
Good night,
possible, let's try tune in early Friday and let's try to do a 2 hours if possible.
Well,
I mean,
okay.
if we can
will-
start
we'll
7,
We'll work
I'll
on
talk
that.
to you, Greg. Greg,
We'll work on that. Yeah,
I'll
we'll
talk
work
to
on
you
that.
when
But
we
you know,
Okay.
we gotta
Miss
close.
Spitz, it's always a pleasure.
Man,
I
go,
feel
go ahead,
good.
Leonard. Good
Right, I
night to
feel
the
good.
people. Good night.
Right, I feel good when you know participate. Right, when you because you know
Go
collectively
ahead, Leonard.
we have the same agenda.
Good night, Mr.
Right?
Chairman.